Started? You have, okay, we're going to get started here. This is the town hall meeting, sort of, for the community block grants from the HUD, the Housing and Urban Development from federal government. I understand that I appreciate that we at least have two people here that are not city staff. And I kind of expected this because this is not something that's really an issue here on the south side in terms of where this money is going to be spent. And more likely it's not going to be spent here on the south side. But it is important that we actually get some feedback from our community when we put this in place. And it's not very much money, a little over $2 million, right?
All sources.
All sources, but specifically, and they've got a lot of strings attached to them, a lot of restrictions, a lot of, I laugh about this because they take the money away from us in taxes and then give it back to us and with a lot of strings attached, and how you can use it and where you can use it and how do you spend it and within the time frame. But it is what it is. I also like to thank Councilmember Jim Klein at large for joining us in this discussion. And so I look forward to hearing what we have to say. So I'll go ahead and turn it over for a presentation.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Councilman Hernandez. I'm Leticia Canmore, the Grant Monitoring Program Manager, and I have with me here Jennifer Buxton, Assistant Director of Planning Community Development, and also Dan McGinn, Director of Planning Community Development. So I would like to welcome everybody that's here and also out in the many platforms, and then always thanking our communication staff for helping us with this endeavor. So that being said, well, let's go ahead and jump right into it. We have a short PowerPoint slideshow, and then we'll just hit a couple of highlights and then talk about things that probably we have not discussed already. We appreciate feedback, whether it's in here or also on the platforms. You have space on, I guess, Facebook Live and then YouTube. So for the agenda for this evening, we're going to just go over an overview of the annual action plan process, what that looks like. We're going to discuss annual action plan priorities that were established in our most recent 5-year con plan. We're going to discuss the use of funds and 3 grants that we received from HUD, which is the Community Development Block Grant, Home Partnerships, Investment Partnerships, and then the Emergency Solutions Grant. We'll talk a little bit about what those type of activities look like. And then we'll entertain the input from the community as far as where they think the needs are for community development and housing and homeless needs of the community. So what is the consolidated planning process? So in order to continue to receive these funds, we have to put together a 5-year con plan that establishes priorities and projects for the next 5 years. And so we did this last year, and it covers years 2023 to 2027. Their priorities, goals, and objectives. And so last year, along with the 5-year con plan, we also submitted the annual action plan for that year that we're currently implementing at this time. Thank you for coming. And so now we're on the 2nd year of the 5-year con plan, and we're going to talk about how we intend to, based on the input, how we intend to spend its annual allocations. Okay, so what are those priorities? As you can tell here, based from the input we received last year, the community decided that the needs were increase and maintain affordable housing. And there's a bullet point list of what that looks like: the housing repair and rehabilitation programs, home buyer and home builder programs, TIBRA, which is a tenant-based rental assistance, and creation of affordable rental housing. Public facilities, what does that look like? Your parks, your youth centers, your senior centers, accessibility improvements, such as ADA at homes and curb sidewalk improvements, blight removal, TIL's code enforcement, and then of course addressing homelessness. Some of those items include just supporting homeless efforts and initiatives, emergency shelter operation support, creation and maintenance of affordable rental housing. That's been the topic this last couple of district meetings, and then rapid rehousing. Public services includes, again, homeless supportive services, senior services, and job training. And then the last component there, it also pays for administration and planning. So these are your priorities that were established by your community based on the input. Okay, so in order to determine the next annual action plan projects, we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like. Again, we talked about receiving the input. That's going to happen first. This is the 5th and last meeting. But you'll have another opportunity to comment once we draft the actual plan and put it out for public comment, and I'll go through that timeline here shortly. So from receiving the input, we're going to start drafting it, working on a plan. In the meantime, we are going to release some notice of funding availability, and that's set to be released on April 1st on our website. And we'll have contact information in the end, and so you can always email us if you have any questions regarding those, or the notice is posted on our website already. And then from there, we have technical assistant workshops scheduled for April 4th, and that's for folks that want to ask us questions like, how do I apply, what do I need to submit, what's the documentation, and we provide that technical workshop, through the technical workshop. And then we do the draft plan, goes out for public comment in June of 2024. Then we take it to council in July of 2024. And then we submit to HUD in August of 2024. So that's what that timeline looks like. Fast. Okay. So how much are we going to receive? As you can tell, and I don't know why the amount is off to the side. Apologize for that. How much do we receive? We have not received our allocations for this year yet, but we're basing the amount from what we received last year. There's always just a small increase or decrease. So for CDBG, we're looking at $2.6 million, for home, $1.3 million, and for ESG, $235,000. So for a combined of about $5 million. Okay, so let's go into CDBG basics first, kind of what those eligible activities look like. You'll see we have a few of them. It's the most flexible grant, by the way. It covers housing rehabilitation, homeownership assistance. So that's going to be like a home buyer type of program, public facilities and improvements, blight, code enforcement, economic development, acquisition and disposition of real property, and public services. Not only are those type of activities eligible, but they also have to meet one of 3 national objectives based by HUD standards. And so the first one is it has to benefit low to moderate income persons. That can be on an individual basis or an area benefit basis, which individuals like a minor home repair service to an individual in their home, and a park would be area benefit. And they have to be in CDBG block grants. Also for the prevention and elimination of blight. And then the last one's urgent needs. It's kind of hard to use this national objective because we cannot plan for a disaster, and that's mainly what it's used for hurricane purposes. We can't plan ahead for those type of things, and they also require pre-approval from HUD before we even put it in the plan. Also, before I forget, a very important point is the amount of funding that we receive is based on a formula that's decided at Congress. It's based on the population and other data that they collect from things such as the census. This is the a map of these community development block grant areas. Those are outlined in green, just to kind of give you an idea basically where they're at. And they're kind of concentrated in this middle area. I don't want to touch the screen, it's going to move. Just wanted to give you a snapshot picture of that. Of course, it's cut off up here, but this is mainly where the area is concentrated. You'll notice that it doesn't go into the island. I'm going to try. So District 5 kind of falls this way towards the bottom. Yeah, am I too low?
It's right here. From here?
Yeah, there you go. Towards the bottom.
There's no green. No green at all.
I knew where he was getting it. Towards the bottom. There you go. All right. So for CDBG funds, what does the community feel or think we should prioritize the funding? As you can tell, you've seen these categories before, and those are pretty much mimic the ones that were identified by the community for the 5-year CON plan, which does address the increase and maintain affordable housing, public facilities, blight, addressing homelessness, public services, and administration and planning, which are all eligible for CDBG. Anybody that would like to comment, we will ask you just to raise your hand, and we'll bring a microphone to you, and you can let us know what you think. We'd appreciate your feedback. Anyone?
I was wondering about zoning? Because I hear from home builders that it's so hard to make a house with all these rules, setbacks and such. What involvement do you guys have for home buyer and home builder programs in terms of zoning and materials? Cost of materials is also expensive, but maybe there are some new innovative ways. Are you incorporating the latest ways to make them as cheap as possible, as still not maintaining the safety, of course, and zoning? That's my concern. Yeah.
Sure. I'm not going to talk to zoning specifically. I'll let Dan speak to that a little bit. But I will talk about our programs that we have in-house for the minor home repair and the single-family rehabilitation. We do work with development services for those homes that are located, especially the older homes. What we find is if you're eligible for the program, they're either located in what is now the flood zone, or they're straddling a lot line. So now, according to these standards, to build a new house, you can't straddle the lot line. So we work with development services to make sure that we either have some type of exemption or get grandfathered in to be able to build for these individuals that own the home and are in need of a new home. As far as zoning, we do abide by all the rules on our side as far as implementing our programs. As far as new zoning regarding the fees and things of that nature, Dan, did you want to speak a little bit to maybe some of the barriers that she's talking about?
Sure. These programs don't necessarily address any of the obstacles or perceived obstacles that zoning and or building codes may help be involved with, but there are different codes that the city has, and that's one thing that's going to be looked at over the next, I think, few months with our development services department.
I hear about tiny homes and all these cool things that are being done in America, but I don't see it being done here. So are you guys collaborating so you can make the rules easier for home builders to make the housing accessible?
Yeah, those will all be items that will be discussed as they work through those Unified Development Code amendments, and there could be changes. I mean, they'll have to kind of go through a process similar to this where they work with the public and then Planning Commission and then ultimately City Council. But they will have a process where they'll accept feedback on proposed changes that may help with that. I know accessory dwelling units is one thing that has come up. We allow those now, but maybe there's some things that we could do to make it a little bit easier for folks to build those. So that will all be discussed in the next probably 6 to 12 months as we work through that process. So, but our development services, I can get your information and give you a contact there of exactly when they're going to start that process. It'll be Andrew Demas at Development Services that will be the coordinator. So.
Real quick, let me add that. And a lot of that we're concerned about, I think, is more not so much about zoning, but construction standards, right? We have to meet windstorm, which we didn't have to do in the past. They have to have certain electrical codes that have to be met that weren't met in the past. Certain things like that can add cost to a standard of a house. In terms of what you're talking about, like tiny homes and those kind of things, the zoning doesn't prevent you from building a house that is 300, 500 square feet. It's just it's not necessarily economically a thing that is something that's desired and can be sold, right? We are working with organizations like the Housing Authority, that has that organization, Thanksgiving Homes, that is building homes at a much lower cost, but it's a good home. It's not, but they'll build it without a garage in order to reduce the cost for the home, and building them in areas. And we're also working with them. I know we're trying to offer the property around the old Lamar Elementary at almost no cost for them to be able to develop these areas. So I understand what you're referring to, but it's not, not every area is the same, and not everybody has the same scenarios. A lot of times you'd like to redevelop areas that have been neglected, but you got to have like a balancing to where you don't gentrify the neighborhood, right? So, and then we only have $5 million. So it's not a lot of money, and there's a lot of restrictions. So.
Thank you. Anyone else like to? Thank you.
Great. Question on the funding. The funding you showed, about $3-4 million, is that citywide, or is that for District 5?
Within city limits, city limits,
In city limits?
and then specific.
That green area, I know, I'm very familiar with a lot of those. You don't have a lot of green areas in the district. So here's the follow-up question. So for the district, does the city allocate that total funds evenly across all council districts? Or is it wherever in the city that it could go for? I think you had 8 categories, some of which are on screen.
Sure.
And so, because that kind of gives us a little bit of context of how much are we talking for District 5, because some of the things you have on the board
Sure.
are expensive things. So is it a even distribution, or is it kind of needs-based, based on those green zones?
Correct. So it is needs-based, and we go through the application process, so it's for those folks that, and agencies that apply and have some type of program in mind that meets the criteria. Then we'll go through the vetting process, we put together a plan, and then we introduce it to City Council. So it's not like an average that, 5 million divided by 5 districts. It's not the way it works. It depends where the needs are, where, especially for like the minor home repairs across the city, within the city limits, if they meet their income criteria. So every one of the grants has their specific regulations and criteria. So with home, for example, we provide funding for multifamily rental projects that offer rental affordable housing. So, and that can be in any district. So that's another example how we leverage the grant funds. Sure. Jennifer, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
So just to tie on to what she's saying, like the $5 million, when we accept applications from other organizations, and they vary in terms of the types of projects that they want. They might be internal city departments asking for park improvements or facility improvements. We also get applications from nonprofits. So as we're looking at this, the input that we receive from these sessions are going to help us determine what kind of applications we accept from those other groups, right? So it's not as if each district gets its own allocation, but it's what of the priorities for the 5-year plan do people want to see at the top of the list, because that's what we're going to prioritize when we review applications to determine who receives funding. Does that make sense? Okay.
Thank you, Jennifer. And she's absolutely correct. We have to tie any of those programs to not only performance metric outcomes, but tie them to the actual priorities that were established.
Okay. Follow-up question, if I can. In the public facilities, infrastructure improvements is something important for me. For those projects, do you have a way to look at opportunity costs? So say the city is now, city council and staff are starting to talk about their next bond, 2024 bond. And on that list of projects, say if you have a park and some of the other facilities, is this money 100% federal, or does it require a match?
Some of the grants do require a match, but we're very careful not to supplant either with the federal funds. So if it's something that the city has already slated to pay for in some type of a bond, for example, then if it's allocated, awarded, and approved by council, we can't go in and supplant
Sure.
with the federal dollars. But we do leverage, let's say the city decides to make improvements at a park, and then we can go in as well in the park. They use general fund for certain elements of the park, and then we have a request from parks also, for example, for splash pads. And then we would cover the splash pads and show the other improvements the city did as leverage and as match of what they did to contribute.
So, no, it sounds good. It sounds like you're trying to get more projects by leveraging, whether the applicant can match some of the money to do more of a park or a facility. So that's
Yes,
good.
sir.
All right, thank
Thank
you.
you. Yes, ma'am. Of course.
With this $5 million budget, how many homeless people do you think will be housed, and how many people will have their lives improved with this $5 million? It's obviously more than one person, so I'm hoping you have a number on that.
Sure. So what we do at the end of every year to be able to have that type of a number is we have to submit to HUD sort of a report card, right? It's due at the end of every year. It's called a consolidated annual performance report. And that shows us, for example, let's say we funded a couple of nonprofits for a program, whether it's emergency shelter, whether it's a job training. So they have to provide to us numbers. They have to show us that they meet the metrics. And then we have to also vet the projects and then have a final number. So we do have those numbers. I didn't bring them with me. We do have the latest caper that is online, and that's accessible to anyone. And those also go out for the public to see at the end of every year. We do post it on our
Is
website.
it like more than 500?
Did you want to? Okay, got it.
So not only these funds, because we also receive homeless funds from the state and from a private foundation. In terms of housing only, this does not include emergency shelter nights, cash benefits or non-cash benefits, but the homeless funds went and assisted about 330 people in the last, and that was with temporary housing, tenant-based rental assistance, reunification, and permanent housing.
No, I mean with a $5 million, how many people you estimate you could help be housed or just help with their homes? Is it more than 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people?
Depends on what kind of help you're talking about, because the different
Home or it's just assistance with a home?
with a home.
I
So
see a home builder program, and then I see home repair. So how many people will actually get a new home with a $5 million? Because I saw like a project being done in another city, for example, and I calculated to be like $200,000 per unit. So you do the math. Will it be something like that? You don't have any like quota or how many people you expect
it
to help?
depends on the types of projects that get funded and approved.
So there's no idea, like $5 million is being spent and we have no idea how many people are going to be helped?
Not until the projects are identified, because
So
until,
will it be more than one person?
yes,
Will it be more than 10 person?
it depends on the projects that are assisted.
So it could be less than 20 people.
It depends on the projects that are assisted. As
And-
we,
and everyone's okay
I'm
with-
sorry, will you let me finish, please? So it depends on the projects that are assisted. If this money goes into parks, then there's no house, right? It depends on the projects that are approved and implemented. So I can't tell you, because there are so many things that are eligible, and based on what the priorities are and what's approved and what is implemented, not every project is the same. Not every project has the same costs. I can't tell you what that person count is without telling you what the
But
what
it's
the
more than
project
one
is.
person though.
For example, I just came into this group 6 months ago, and so I'm a volunteer coach for a soccer club that uses Salinas Park. So I've been at Salinas Park 3 nights a week for probably the last 6 or 7 years. And so a lot of these CDBG funds have gone into Salinas Park to make improvements to the playground, splash pad, new trail system. And I can assure you that 5 years ago, there was probably my soccer team and maybe 20 others in that park. Last night, there's probably 200 or 300 people in that park every night of the week using all the facilities that have been paid for through these CDBG funds. So that community is taking advantage of that. Can you equate that in numbers over a year? I mean, I suppose you could come to some numbers, but it's a major benefit to that part of our community that needs those services, those recreational, there's health issues specifically in that area. So we know these dollars are working and helping that community.
Yeah,
And so-
last point. So you know, you don't know how many people would use it, but could you at least have an estimation of the capacity, or it's impossible? You know it helps more than one person, but we can't say if it's more than 20 people, 50 people, 100 people. So I'm just wondering, because like $5 million is being spent and we don't know how many people are going to be helped.
Sure.
We don't
So
have an
again, the
estimation.
caper would show the actual outcome. So for example, let's go with the minor home repair. We fund it every year. Every year we fund 36 or 37 folks. That's every year. We have a wait list right now was 5 years. Single family rehab, we have a 20-year waiting list. We help 5 to 10 people actually build from the ground up, demolish the house, build them a new one. And these are just examples of what you would see in the caper. So 5 houses were built for that fiscal year. Okay, then you move on to the multifamily affordable housing rental units. They built 112 units, Fish Pond, to help 111 seniors.
Do you guys have
relocate.
goals
So
at least?
there is hard numbers for those metrics, for those programs that were funded that specific year, just going back to Jennifer's point and then Dan's point. For the park, it's an area of benefit, so those numbers are fairly high. We're talking about 30,000 people, and those are counted by parks. Those are actual metrics that we have to meet. So, for example, for increase and maintain affordable housing, when we submit the annual action plan, we actually have to show the number that we said that we're gonna help. So, and then the CAPER at the end of the year shows how many help. Let's say we said we're gonna help build 10 houses, but we only built 5. That's where you would see those numbers.
So where will I be able to see this number after this meeting?
Sure, it's the CAPER, and the CAPER is on our website at the City of Corpus Christi
I
and
just go
Grant
to-
Monitoring Division.
Okay, so I go on your website and I just type in CAPER.
You can, or you can go to Grant Monitoring. That'll take you right to it also. You
But
can Google
you can't
it.
give me the number though. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I did provide some numbers.
Grabbing the mic here.
Sure.
I think everybody knows me. I think
You're
you're new
welcome,
to me.
David.
So I'm gonna bring this into the green area for the topic. The green area are where we're spending all of our resources for the city. We're talking about the census map.
That would be for CDBG, and those are eligible areas. That doesn't necessarily mean we're spending all the CDBG funds there. Yes, just for
And I'm not
clarification.
implying that we are. I'm saying that those areas are the areas that are receiving or having to receive city services more than the other areas. And there's a good reason why. I mean, if you're using first responder, I'm a first responder. I'm
Yes, sir.
37 years a firefighter. So I've been on the streets dealing with it. So I'm concerned about those areas that most people, and you would say glad it's not in your neighborhood. It's in all of our neighborhoods.
Well, what I'm saying is that the need is not here.
It isn't, and it's not something that we should be proud of. I'm thinking that what we have here is a problem that our areas have a decisive problem that we need to, as a collaborative, all of the communities need to help resolve it. So we're spending so much money on city services in certain areas because they're lower income, because they're not treated the same. Well, all of our firefighters, I'm going to throw some stats at you and you can all research it. The busiest ambulance in United States is in our city. We responded as a city and provided another ambulance to handle that because this is higher than Chicago, and I 37 years on Chicago to see an ambulance working so hard in one area. They produced another ambulance. They put it in that area, and now they have 2 of the most responding ambulances in United States in Corpus Christi.
And David, just to be clear, you're talking about in the census tract areas,
Yes,
and these are
exactly.
numbers that you
We're-
grab?
We're back on that,
Oh, got it.
where we have a different color here. It doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Those areas need help, and we can give it to them. And we have a lot of ways of doing that. Adding housing would be one, but not adding housing to the areas that are needing those services, but spreading out the housing, the affordable housing, throughout all the communities evenly, so they have all of the services that we can render as a whole.
Just 1 second, thank you.
Okay. To say that we're not getting them on the south side, we are. We have 9% housing tax credit programs and 4% housing tax credit programs. There are several on the south side that applies to. So those are reduced rents that are locally here. If you go down Cimarron, there's a senior one that's right across that. If you know where the Rome's auto services.
Yes.
On Cimarron, that apartment complex right next to it is a lower income or reduced rents facility that's on the south side.
Right.
Okay, there was applications for one right off of Holly, right next to the meat marketplace, Moody's. Unfortunately, we didn't get that one, but there are these low income housing that are on the south side. We're not trying to prevent people from coming here on that with that aspect. So, and we just got a fire EMS unit at Fire Station 17 over here on Yorktown. We didn't have that before. They were taking it from Fire Station 6 over on Weber. Right. So, so I understand what you're saying. We're not excluding people from living on the south side and taking advantage of some of our things here. So I don't want to leave that impression. But with regards to what HUD is requiring, they're requiring it based on needs. And I want to say it's for the CBD block grant, not for the home one, right? So I didn't want to leave the impression that we're not getting this here because of that. It's just the way that the HUD assigns that funding.
It's also the way we assign our services. If we have the ability to move people into housing in all our neighborhoods, we have the ability of evening out these stressors that are put on those communities. It is a blight, and it needs to be fixed. We can do that if we move housing units, and if we don't have the centralized housing in Corpus Christi, and we do put some really good projects in. I can tell you how Chicago did it. They diminished.
But you're saying that we're not doing it, and we are.
They've diminished all of their housing units. And this was thousands of units, and they had to reestablish housing throughout Chicago. It was a very unique situation for them. They were one of the first. St. Louis was actually the first. Chicago took the lead on that and made this program work. I'm gonna cap this off.
I believe you, David.
I'm gonna cap this off real quick. They took the housing out of these 20-story buildings, and they relocated everybody into townhomes, very small print, 3-unit townhomes throughout the city, in every single neighborhood. And all the services that are provided then for all of their needs are now spread out and not defined by those green lines.
Yep.
It works. It worked for them. It can work for us. Are we going to have developers that are going to say, hell no? We are, but there is an answer to that too. Go ahead.
I've got your email address. I'm going to send you the map that we share with council every year when we take our affordable housing projects to council that shows where in recent history the affordable housing complexes have been built. It will show a geographic distribution of the units excluding the island. That we don't have any on the island. So, but there are some in every district. And then what you're talking about, what happened in Chicago and St. Louis, that was as a result of a federal lawsuit against housing projects that were built by the Housing Authority.
You're right.
I know exactly what I'm talking about. That was specific to Cabrini Greens in Chicago, and it took them about 20 years to accomplish that, and it was a huge feat. We don't have that same sort of concentration, and since then, there have been several federal policies, state policies, and local policies that have done things to deconcentrate low-income housing in certain neighborhoods. It's called environmental justice and housing justice. The Housing Authority here, or not the Housing Authority, the Texas Department of Housing and Urban Affairs, when they allocate tax credits in order to score points and to win, you can't be within so many miles of another deal that's been funded within so many years, so on and so forth. You have to have school attainment districts, those kinds of things, to make sure that the projects that are being funded are near amenities that everybody can use, and those amenities are equal across, that you are choosing locations where anybody would want to live and not forcing low-income people to live there. Does that make sense? I get what you're saying. We can have this conversation. I'm going to send you that map, though, so you can see what I'm talking about. All right?
And I'll still hold to those poor guys on those fire departments that have to deal with that. But we then go on to the next thing of how we can take the issue of the people that are in need and give them a hand up. And this is important. This might not be as much in our neighborhood, but it is definitely centralized in certain areas where these people absolutely need a hand up. Now, I don't know that the city is going to project anything to do that, but people that are advocates for homeless and people that are in home security do have a hand up. They have it by the advocates. Now, if those advocates had connection with all of the services in not only the city, but all of the, again, I do the silos, so but all of the entities that are now providing services for the homeless, they're not sharing data. They're not
Some of it
connected
is
to the
protected.
homeless. They're really kind of defined in their own walls and how they're dealing with things. And that's their thing. I can't change that either. But I can tell you that we have so many people in our area that want to help homeless, a person that just needs shoes. And somebody would walk up and see that they do.
Thank you.
How do they make that work? Well,
Sure.
they can't at this moment,
Yeah.
but we can.
And we do fund
With
those agencies that
technology,
provide those services. Hold on just a second.
You don't, to the supporters of these homeless people that don't have any connection with you.
Okay, let me give you my perspective on this, okay? Sure. And I have a very unique perspective because I used to be homeless. I was homeless I missed my entire 8th grade year living in a Salvation Army homeless shelter. I have more knowledge of this than most, probably more than anybody in this room, okay? We as a city government cannot supplant the organizations that do this. I don't want to supplant them because realistically a city bureaucrat does not care. It's not their job. They go to work at 8 a.m., they leave at 5 o'clock. Okay? It's not anything against them. It's their job. They have to do that. Those organizations like the Salvation Army, like Mission 911, they care. That's what they're doing. It's a calling, a mission for them. Absolutely. Okay? I don't want to supplant them. I want to support them. And I made sure that I had this direct conversation with our city manager that you don't take their place. You support them in what they're trying to accomplish. If we try to take their place, we will screw it up. I've seen it. Government screws crap up all the time. And you've probably seen it because you worked for the government, yes. Right? Okay? We screw it up. I don't want to replace them. They have to apply for these monies from us. We administer it. We give it to them. We gave, Salvation Army $120,000 in the last one? We give organizations, they have to apply, okay? Unfortunately, these have all sorts of strings on them. I can't control that. But we don't want to supplant them. These people aren't going to replace, whoever's, life mission it is to help the homeless. And we shouldn't. We should support them.
Can I introduce a great friend of mine here that
oh yes, I'm familiar.
Father Bruce here is really a mentor of mine. So I'm gonna send this over to him and hopefully
so
he might have
what if I can I want to make sure that we stay on our task. I understand what you're saying. I understand that it's incredibly important. We've also talked about the homelessness issues, and we've talked to both David and Bruce last night. I want to make sure that we're hearing from everybody in the room and that we're getting through all 3 of our programs and we're accomplishing what we set here to do. So I understand your passion for the homelessness issue, but we really do want to get feedback on the types of projects that you'd like to see funded with CDBG, home, and ESG. We can stand here and debate how to address homelessness and who should be at the table for hours. But what I would like to do is make sure that we have the opportunity to hear from everybody on all 3 programs so we can accomplish our task. And David and Bruce, I am committing to having this conversation with you after this time, but I would like to make sure we hear from everybody in the room and that we let Leticia continue through the slides. Can we pick this up at a separate conversation? I'm not shutting you down. I'm not shutting you down. Fert, this is night 3. So, I'm I'm very interested in what you have to say. We all are, but I want to make sure that we hear from all of the participants and that we get an opportunity to hear from everybody on all of the programs, so that we can accomplish what we need to accomplish, and we can continue the homelessness conversation. Unless there's something that occurred between last night and tonight that you want to bring to the table that we haven't already discussed. But I'm not shutting you down, I swear. But we do have to continue forward, okay? Thank you.
Anyone else have any feedback or comments? Okay, we'll jump right into the next type of fund. Thank you, Jennifer. Home investment partnerships, program basics. One of the common themes, obviously homelessness and housing, and this is what home is all about, is housing. So type of activities that are eligible under this grant is housing rehabilitation, homeownership assistance, new construction of affordable housing, and then tenant-based rental assistance. Based on those categories, what would you like to see as a group here to be funded with home, as far as increasing and maintaining affordable housing under any of those subcategories, addressing homelessness? We've heard a lot about that, and administration and planning. Anyone? And this is the, just wanted to say that this is the grant where we leverage for those low-income housing tax credit projects. Yes, ma'am, back there.
Again, back to my last point. I like for this money to be used to help the most people possible. If it means homes, like $100,000 homes for each person, that's what I would like to see, the most optimal amount of people help. Because what this is all about at the bottom of all this is helping people. So that's what I would like to see.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Anyone else? Councilman Klein, any comments? Okay. Yes.
You're getting the workout. Related to the first item for housing.
Yes, housing repair and rehabilitation.
Any impact from the industry of shortage of labor to do, all of the housing? And if there's a limitation, have you seen that in the last couple of years, that they're not the industry would rather pay for the higher end housing as opposed to affordable housing because they make more money? Is there any impact on that, or your applications are strong to do that kind of work anyway?
So for that particular subcategory, we implement the programs in-house from our department. We have housing programs. We have the single-family rehabilitation. We rehab homes that have, they don't meet the minor home repair thresholds, but they meet the rehab thresholds, but they don't meet the demolition. So they're kind of in the middle. They don't qualify for the other program, but they're in the middle for, say $40,000. They need a new roof. They need an ADA bathroom and a ramp. Okay, and then the demolition reconstruction is actually a new house, and with that we have specific contractors that help us with those. As a matter of fact, hopefully here we'll have more contractors. So we don't have the bigger builders, if you will, that participate in our program. Again, going back to Councilman Hernandez, they are tied to regs. They have to produce to us all types of documentation. And the one thing that I should have kickstarted with as well that needs to be mentioned, as these grants work in the form of reimbursement. So you have to put the agencies that apply to us, they have to put the money first, then they submit it to the city for reimbursement. So not only do they have to have the capital for it and bid and check off all the boxes for HUD, but now they're spending their money up front. Then they submit to us all the invoices. We monitor them, confirm it, and then we pay them back. And so that's how that works. So I don't know if I answered your question directly or indirectly. We haven't, through our contractors, seen the shortage. I mean, they do have their own MEPs. They have their subcontractors, their windstorm insurance engineers, all of those for the programs that for the construction they do for us, for our programs. On a larger scale, Dan, do you have any data showing otherwise?
I mean, with our program, I don't think that has been a problem as far as finding enough contractors to do the work. Our numbers aren't, the limits versus maybe development services. I don't know what they're seeing in the single family. I'm not directly involved day to day like Al or Michael Dice over at development services to see if that's a problem. But So yeah, it's not impacting us. There's enough workers to do for our program that we're not slowing down any based on lack of workers.
Thank you. Any other feedback on this? We're jumping into the next grant. Emergency Solutions Grant. What are those eligible activities? You talk about homelessness, this is the topic grant. So it covers these components under ESG: street outreach, homeless prevention, emergency shelter, rapid rehousing, HMIS, which is a homeless management information system, and administrative activities. So this is the funding that we receive, $235,000 a year, to nonprofits that are able to provide these services. Okay, what type of projects would you like to see based on the information with the ESG funds? Does anybody wish to make a comment?
What's the amount again?
$235,000.
It's not a lot of money.
And this one is a match dollar for dollar.
Well, it's not a lot of money is the whole point, and how it's used has to be really, analyzed. And there is an idea that we can use street outreach in a different way. And again, that's using advocates on the street to help each other, to pull themselves out of the conditions they are and bring them up through society. It's an easy thing to do, and it doesn't cost the city money. A matter of fact, if we use it with technology, like in an app that can give everybody all of the information from all of the different entities on how they can help people.
Please do. We're open to that. As a matter of fact, you've talked given us a couple examples of cities that have successful business models. We'd like to see those, and we do fund those agencies that provide these programs. I know you mentioned an app. We have noted that. Is there anything additional that you wanted to add to that?
No, just tying it into the first the first comment that I had, that if we have people that are out there doing outreach on their own, not under a budget of the city, those people will actually lessen the burden on the first responder services, on all of the services.
So you're talking more along the lines like coordinated entry, somebody's needing services, or the way that program,
exactly. I call it
framework should work.
But point of contact is actually a person meeting a person and helping them out. If they have resources on an app, that would be totally the city's under their privy. Those people would have all of these essential needs at their fingertips. Somebody comes out of a Walmart and they're presented with a person that needs some kind of care. Well, that's blown away. It's just somebody not being helped. That's tradition.
So through the app, it's
But
back through the...
A person that really wants to help, any advocate, and that's every person in Corpus Christi, has the ability to reach out if we had the technology sitting there to do it, but of course, the hearts of the people that are willing to do this on their own. It lessens the need for me to go out there as a firefighter and have to deal with a social services issue.
Understood. And we can definitely continue to have that conversation.
Okay.
I know you've hit a couple of, they're all good points, and we've heard it, and we can expand on that if I can just get through the next couple of slides. Go ahead.
A quick question, last two bullets for ESG and rapid rehousing. For ESG, would support of cooling centers or warming centers be part of that?
The emergency shelters, I think they open up for those type of projects. They're a coordinated effort with the city, and Jennifer can talk to you a little bit about what those initiatives look like. But the funds have to be used specifically under these components.
Okay. Yeah, and I think I would.
So we wouldn't fund just one center with ESG just for winter or for heat, right? It would have to be a pass-through through existing agencies and where they're set up. He was talking about warming centers, if ESG can be used specific for warming centers and cooling centers, and so we.
They would qualify as an emergency shelter.
Okay. It's not a lot of money, but
No.
if you could leverage the 135,000 for someone that does that, because those are kind of emergency situations.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
So we had a cold spell here about a month ago, a month and a half back, middle part of January or so, and the city was good enough to open up some warming shelters overnight. There's an overnight shelter, I think,
Jennifer.
over at the natatorium, I guess, the gymnasium.
Yep,
City-
CC Gym.
Right. So were ESG funds used, or could they be retroactively applied to that, or does that not work that way?
It doesn't work that way. Could we have? I don't even know. But when an emergency event like that happens, each department that contributed is responsible for those costs. In the case of, for example, Winter Storm Uri back in 2021, that event was reimbursable because it was declared a disaster on the national and the state level, I want to say. So that was reimbursable. So every department, including Public Works and Parks and everybody, had reimbursable costs because it was a disaster. Because this last cold snap in January was not any sort of disaster, there's no agency that reimburses. So homeless services, that came out of what we did came out of our general fund budget. Parks, who hosted the facility, that came out of their budget. Any of the staff whose staff volunteered to work that shelter as part of the refuge teams, those departments where they came from, they covered the cost of that staff working in those departments.
So you think then that HUD would not allow that money to be used for cooling centers and warming centers of that sort?
So a cooling center or a warming center, are you talking about shelter or just a warming center or a cooling center? Because like, for example, the library serve as a cooling center, right? That would not be HUD eligible. An emergency shelter situation would be eligible. However, HUD requires us to plan for everything in advance, right?
But that seems counterintuitive to
Yep.
ESG. If it's supposed to be for emergencies.
Yes.
You're supposed
So
to
what
plan
then you have
for
to, you have to then look at a facility. You can't do a pop-up emergency shelter like we did with CC Gym and say, use ESG funds for it. Not to mention, earlier on in the year, we would have hypothetically awarded those to the Salvation Army and Corpus Christi Hope House and Endeavors and whoever. So to then say, oh, we're going to fund a shelter, we would then actually be removing money from their contracts, right? So we would have to do it in advance, assuming that it was going to happen due to weather. And it takes certain conditions in order for the city to do that. And it's duration and severity of the event.
Right. So thinking more about cooling centers, it's not necessarily a shelter, but cooling centers, there seems to be a reasonable expectation that we're going to need cooling centers in the year 2024, and again next year in 2025.
I would assume so. But, you know, I'm not.
But so could those ESG funds be used for something like that, or that's just strictly for shelters, not for cooling centers?
They're not for cooling centers. Cooling centers, ESG funds serve people who are homeless and at risk of homeless and provide homeless services. Cooling centers do not. Our cooling centers serve people who are homeless, but they also serve other people, right? So a cooling center in and of itself is not a homeless service. But that's a lot of who the clientele are. I mean, I get where you're going with that, but ESG doesn't necessarily cover that. It would depend on how we set up the program, what the location was, and who the clients were. Thank you.
Sorry, I think I lost my place. So it sounds like we would want to fund, I'm sorry, let me go back where I was at. So, Councilman Klein, you're saying probably concentrate the monies in the emergency shelter component. You would like to see those funds dedicated.
But it sounds as if there seems to be kind of something kind of counterintuitive.
There's also a homelessness component under community development block grant called public service, and that is not just for persons who are homeless. That can be for other persons as well. We are limited in the total amount of our CDBG funds that can be spent on public service, but it's possible that something like that could be supplemented, not supplanted, but supplemented with CDBG funds. And not ESG. We might just not be talking about the correct federal source. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's all about beneficiary component, eligible activity, and where it fits. Yeah, which I know is not clear. I know it's not clear.
Okay, anyone else? Okay. Oh,
Well, I'm part of this homeless, trying to figure out a solution. I'd like to see money spent on the homeless. I met a lady outside Walmart. She was 67 years old. She had fallen, hurt her ankle or her leg. She was using a cane. She was asking for $7. She is not a drug addict or an alcoholic. Her job let her go, and she lost her car because she couldn't pay for it, and she lost her housing. And I grew up here. I went to Carroll High School. I grew up here since elementary. I left town, lived in Dallas for many years, lived in California for many years. I'm 63. I feel like this city is kind of run down. I hate to say it. I'm used to kind of a different standard now. But I feel like the difference between the have-nots and the haves is extremely different. And sometimes I think people look at the homeless and they think they're all just a bunch of drug addicts or alcoholics, but it's really not the case. And I think if money can be spent on them, there's just basic things like they need lockers. Their stuff gets stolen. They don't have any ID. How are you going to get a job if you don't have an address? How are you going to get a Texas ID if you don't have an address? It's like a very complex issue. And I mean, I don't really need to say a lot about it. It's pretty obvious, but that's just my 2 cents. I don't think we need any more water parks. We already have a water shortage. I think we need to clean up the city. That's just my opinion.
thank you for the feedback.
Sorry, it sounds kind of harsh, and I'm not trying to make it sound harsh, but
Thank you for the
I
feedback.
think people need a chance and a help and stuff.
And we do have homelessness on top of the list. Okay, thank you so much. Anyone else? Okay, okay. So that brings us to the end. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes,
We have 2 minutes.
yes. I have 2 more slides. Okay. So this is the last of the 5 district meetings. It does not mean this is your last opportunity to provide feedback. We will have a draft plan out for public comment in June. You'll have 30 days, and it will be posted on the website, so you can send to us comments. Okay, but this is the last of the district meetings. I think any other questions and input on needs, and then we have contact information on the last slide. This is myself, Jennifer, and Dan, and then we have Nora Vargas, who is not here with us today, and she's a program manager for homeless and housing services. Yes, sir.
I remember last year, we were all here, and it was a surprise that everybody in the room, it was more than this, all focused on homelessness, and not in a bad way. They wanted to know, what can we do for homelessness? And so overall, I think the heart, the mood of the room, again, is mostly what can we do, how can we direct these funds in a way that maximizes the support of the homeless population? I think I'm reading the room, and there's a lot of great things we can do with the funding that you're alluding to, but the most vulnerable people have got to be a priority. The measure of success of any city is how you handle, how you treat, what you do for the most vulnerable people, right? I think that's the mood of the room. And yeah, I've got so much to say about that. I'm not even going to try with just a minute or 2 left. I picked up a few thoughts from other comments, like on the developers that you were mentioning. I think one thing that's just important to know is that the for-profit developers cannot afford to build housing for the lowest income people. If they're coming off the street with 0 income, our for-profit developers, they just can't afford to build housing for that. Or the answer is not always building new construction. It can be working with landlords, refurbishing other homes, but there are nonprofit developers. We have one here already, And so I would say, however we can direct the funding that we're talking about here, CDBG, I guess in particular, direct funding to our nonprofit builders. They're the developers. They're the ones who can develop the housing one way or another for the people, the lowest income people. And that's not exactly what you're asking, but. No, the one that's here now is Come Dream, Come Build. They came out of Brownsville. They've kind of saturated the Rio Grande Valley with affordable housing, the whole spectrum from housing insecure to the very lowest income off the street. So they're just a good option to have when you're talking about really low-income housing as a developer.
And we hope to see them apply.
Yeah, there was something about outreach.
Street outreach,
Street
one of the
outreach.
components.
Because
for
I think
ESG.
in a plan to actually end homelessness, which we could talk about while Gil's here particularly, because ending homelessness is happening. Ending homelessness is possible. If we studied ending homelessness like we study desalinization, we would know that this is happening across the country and that there's a path for doing that that's set up by housing and urban development and in line with THN, other organizations like the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness. There is a path to do that, and it's happening. And there's 4 cities in Texas that THN told us to talk to because they're doing it, right? And there's no reason we can't do it here. It's not supplanting the agencies that we have. It's working together with them and getting them to work together with each other. It's reorganizing how we approach homelessness. But ending homelessness is also preventing homelessness, and it's getting out on the street to identify the homeless population that we've got. We know we got 600 and something from the pit count, but it's more like 1,000 or more. I mean, we don't know, and we don't know how to measure progress on ending homelessness until we have that count. So street outreach, I think, would be a really important place to spend those. Was that ESG funds for ESG funds? And the rest of it, I think, just in short, it's how can we direct those funds to benefit the most vulnerable people? And just one more thing to add to that is that I don't even want us to leave thinking that this is just an initiative to end homelessness. This is an economic development issue, because the cost of homelessness is more than putting people into a house with a case manager. The cost of homelessness, particularly the health care, using the emergency room as a primary doctor, it's astronomical what we're spending on health care. It's astronomical what we're spending on incarceration. I mean, those are a couple of the biggest ones, but all the goods and services, homelessness is not getting better in Corpus Christi. It's getting worse. Look at the numbers. So, I lost my point.
So concentrate the programming or funding for homelessness.
Well, yeah,
Services.
I think that's the general point. But
And then housing.
and preventing is ending. Ending homelessness and preventing homelessness are the same thing, right? So you got to do both of those. And dang, I just lost the point I was going to make.
So the 4 communities you mentioned before was Beaumont, Lubbock, Abilene.
right.
Was it Denton?
Right.
And we have those listed.
And they're willing to be allies with us to help us. I guess I was just thinking that we have to count the people who are without a shelter in order to start measuring the progress of ending homelessness. And I guess in short, ending homelessness is a doable thing, and it is an economic benefit. Oh yeah, because all the money that we spend, the cost of homelessness, which is getting worse, is costing us more. Putting them into a house with a case manager is cheaper. I don't know if it's going to come down to getting a consultant, a third-party neutral consultant to come in and help us calculate in Corpus Christi the cost of housing, but there's a ton of research on this just across the country. And communities that are in the process of ending homelessness and they're ending homelessness will witness to that's an economic benefit for us.
And we really try to leverage our federal dollars for those organizations where we can, serve the most, and there's other funding available.
Right. So I just want to thank you, Letitia and Jennifer and Gil, for coming out and listening to us.
Of course.
Try to get some movement on ending homelessness. And it's going to take more than just the funds that we're talking about tonight.
Yes, sir.
It's like figuring out how to get more of the fund. Part of the benefit is that once you get on the track that's set up to end homelessness, you're getting more funding from HUD. And then you can leverage more funding. And the more progress we make, the more funding we get. So it's a win-win to actually focus on ending homelessness. And so thanks for everybody who cares about the issue.
Yes, thank you to everybody here in the room and everybody on the other platforms. With that, thank you very much for coming. Not sure if you want any closing remarks. Okay. Dan, Jennifer? Thank you very much. Good night.